All right. So today I'm going to be talking about the path to 40 million installs, the history of GitLens. I work at GitLens, or at GitKraken that owns GitLens, and my name's Chris Griffing. So a little bit about me. I've been a dev for around 10 years, mostly on the front end. In my own time, I do full stack stuff just for fun. And I'm a developer advocate at GitKraken. I've been there for about a year and a half, and I'm really liking it. I just make content all the time, and I get to come to stuff like this. I program on Twitch. That's actually where I met PJ. You know, like, I also really like to snowboard. And those are basically just my favorite hobbies. I'm really hoping at some point that someone will have a conference at Lake Tahoe during the winter. That would be great. The other person I want to introduce is Eric Amodio. He is the author of GitLens, and I'm basically like here as a proxy for him because he doesn't like public speaking that much. He's the CTO at GitKraken, and he's been a dev for around 25 years, 15 years in leadership. Now, who here uses GitLens? Any hands? We see only a couple. Wow, I usually see more hands than that. So that means that you guys are actually going to learn something about what GitLens is. So it's a VS Code plugin. Who here uses VS Code? Okay, at least a few more hands. What you're seeing is on that line 14, I know it might be a little hard to read, but on line 14 here you see some like gray text where it says Eric Amodio 5 years ago overhauls git command. That is the inline blame feature of GitLens. That was one of the very first features. And all this is doing is just giving us context over who changed what lines of code and where, and this is the one that I have my cursor on right now, and it'll just move around as you kind of like navigate your files. If you hover over it, you get this nice pop-up that has all this extra context. And the value is just giving you all of this info without having to find it, without having to know like what git command you would run for that. And you can even inspect what some of these commands that are getting run under the hood are if you turn on debug mode, which is really informative to understand some of the more complex git like features and things that are happening under the hood. And there's far more features in this. It's not much of a product pitch. I want to actually talk about just the path that he went through to build this, and I find it interesting myself. So let's look at right now where we are. We're at 44 million installs, and it was 40,000 less just 2 days ago. So it's massively increasing. And I'm not exactly sure, but we can guess at reasons for it. One of them might be the support from the VS Code team. They are very, very supportive because, you know, GitLens was one of the first Git-focused extensions for VS Code. And here in the extension marketplace, you can even see a screenshot where GitLens is featured as the second thing in that list. Now they're sorting by installs. I should probably look up and see where we are in like being the most installed extension still. This is probably from two years ago. Here's actually a growth over time. And this value here is not a zero, it's 336K. This is a little less than a year after it was created. But you can see that, you know, that path to 44 million is this exponential growth. And, you know, I had to use the Wayback Machine to find all this. And I couldn't go back to the very first like version of it to see like where it really started, you know, but just amazing progress. Like 2017, 336K, 2019, 2.6 million, and it just goes up from there. So let's look at where we started. This is Eric Amodio back in around 2016. And yeah, that's definitely not a beer he's drinking. That's him consuming VS Code and Git because he's a big fan of both. He was really interested in VS Code because he was using Visual Studio when he was doing some C# stuff. He had used Sublime Text for some other things. But really, like, VS Code was one of the first editors, besides Atom, where you could get really into the source code and see how things were working, and you could fiddle with it and mess with it. And they made the extensions basically 6 months after the initial release of it by making it public. And the extension stuff is really where he started becoming a fan, because he had made extensions for Outlook, he made a couple extensions for Visual Studio itself, and yeah, he really wanted to opt into it. And he was also working on a team that was migrating away from Subversion into Git, and he wanted to make sure that his team was actually learning about how to use Git better, how to just understand it more, and giving all of these insights into the editor made them way more productive. So around August 8th, 2016 was the very first commit to GitLens. And it was really just this very small bit. It wasn't even that inline blame that I was showing. It was this thing in like the status bar at the bottom of VS Code. And it's very useful, right? You still get some info as you're navigating the files and seeing what's being changed. But over the years, he's added just so many more features that are powerful and cool. Here you can even see one called CodeLens that he actually kind of stole from Visual Studio. He didn't take the code, but he took the idea of this block above the function, kind of annotating who last modified that function, being able to navigate the history of when it was modified and all those things. This was something that just didn't exist at the time. But at least for me personally, I tend to miss this whenever I'm like setting up a new machine because I forget that GitLens is giving that to me. It's one of those things that I just think VS Code has out of the box, and then I realize I need to reinstall it. So as we're looking at this, right, like what really changed here between 2017 and 2019? Well, part of it might be Scott Hanselman. He is just an amazing person, very humble, very cool. And you can see that he's saying, I have never seen such an amazing plugin for code as GitLens. You need to try this now. Links to it. And just someone like Scott Hanselman supporting this and shouting it out. Eric replied, so humbled, thank you for the kind words, to which Scott Hanselman, with his great sense of humor, says, legit, I'm going to tell random people on the bus. It's insane. So then Eric was making this extension. He was one of the early movers in building extensions for this ecosystem, this marketplace, and he started contributing to VS Code itself because he found bugs in the extension APIs. He found bugs in just VS Code in general. He started contributing enough that they even invited him to Zurich to meet the entire VS Code team. And then finally, he just joined Microsoft because they wanted to get more Git integrations into VS Code. And who better to ask than someone who had built something that was downloaded millions of times? So he joined Microsoft in around 2019 and was there until 2021. One of the big things that he is very proud of is you can even see in Satya's keynote at one of these Microsoft events, they're talking about Visual Studio Online, something that Eric worked on as well. And you can even see GitLens in the background there. It's very faint where you can see the line that's being hovered, but at the top you can see that CodeLens as well. And it's just very cool to have your tool used and shown at such a big stage. And then eventually, it got acquired by GitKraken. GitKraken is a desktop GUI for Git. It started out very humble as just like a project in a hackathon, and it has grown into this suite of tools such as a CLI, GitLens, GitKraken Desktop, and even some web apps and other stuff too, like an MCP server. This GitLens thing really helps complete that suite, and it was pretty powerful. One of the things to really recognize is that was in 2021, and we can see this jump from 9 million installs all the way up to 24 million. And it's just continuing that growth. It's not simply doubling every year. It's actually growing faster than doubling. It's exponential. GitKraken has this budget where we can promote things. We can shout it out. He never did any promotion of his own, really, for GitLens, and it was still growing at that pace. But now that we can put money behind it, it's awesome. One of the things to recognize is he didn't do all this on his own. He had contributors. For the most part, he's probably, at this time, he was probably contributing 95% of the code, though. Finally, once he got acquired by GitKraken, he was able to have a team that works with him, and some of these other people are great, really knowledgeable about how to build within the VS Code ecosystem, and hugely valuable in just understanding how Git internals work, because they're just calling out to Git from the VS Code system. They're calling out to your command line using the Git that you have installed. So now, let's think about this. Where are we going? What we saw with Git Butler's butt rub command, which I think is hilariously named, there's a thirst for being able to rewrite your commits, being able to make these things easier to read later. Because it's not just about writing code for now, it's about understanding where that code came from so you can solve bugs later by understanding the context and the history. So Commit Composer is one of these AI things we're working on. And we're working on other AI tools as well, but I just think this is one of my favorite parts. There's Git Butler, there's Graphite, there's GitKraken, there's all these tools built on top of Git. And just because they're different companies, we're still on the same team of making devs more productive with Git, saving them the time and effort of having to memorize all 70+ commands in Git. And I think there's even more that are planned. I really like the idea of not treating this as a zero-sum game and just building tools that make devs happier and more productive. So that was my slides. I may have talked way too fast, but you can connect with me on socials by scanning this QR code, and you can also just grab that from me later during the beer session. Were there any questions? I don't know that, but I can ask. Okay, so you do use GitLens?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll pass that to the team. All right. Thank you very much.